Hey, you guys, thanks for listening into this episode of Tips with T. On today, I have Mr. Rocky with us. Hey, Mr. Rocky, how are you doing today?
Hey T, how are you? Very good. Thanks for asking. Hope you're well also.
I'm doing very, very well. So thank you for being a guest on the show today. Tell us more about yourself and what you do.
Well, thanks for having me first off, and a little bit about myself. I spent 36 years at UPS and then retired from UPS and took on a role as a CEO of a telecom company. We built cell towers, upgraded cell towers, had a sale there, and now started my own business, 360 Management Services. So I guess T, you could say I struggle with retirement.
Mhm. Not struggle with retirement. A lot of people be like, I'm excited about retirement.
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, we have 7 grandkids. We just had 2 more in the last 4 weeks, so that's exciting and takes up a lot of. It's a wonderful time, but I do enjoy connecting with great individuals like yourself and your audience, and it keeps me young and keeps me involved. So I just got off a call with one of our clients that we do consulting with. So I do enjoy that as well. But I'm finding work-life balance a little. I'm working a little bit more on my work-life balance.
Awesome. So what kind of consulting do you do exactly? So our listeners.
So Yeah, so we have 3 legs of our stool at 360. One of which is keynote speaking, which I do the keynote speaking, and obviously, as we're going through this difficult time, I've actually been doing some virtual keynotes, so which has been interesting. And then we do leadership training, and have done some virtual leadership training. And then our consulting side of the business is really about a process improvement. We take a holistic look at things, and then we look at how it impacts not only the customers that the companies are dealing with, but also their employees as well as the shareowners and stakeholders. So it's kind of a holistic approach, and it's very much process driven.
Okay, cool. So I know previously we had talked about you basically, you was working for UPS, correct? So that's a franchise. And I know a lot of people, they're probably looking during this time to start a business, but not necessarily their own business. So if someone is interested in starting a franchise, how can they get started?
That's a great question. And I work with a lot of small businesses. And during my time at UPS, I had the responsibility for, then it was MBE when we purchased it. Today it's the UPS store, great network. And it's interesting. So there's 2 approaches. One approach is obviously you start your own business and you're driving the branding and you're driving the traffic. So for example, if you're starting a pack and ship business, it may be T's pack and ship business.
Mhm.
And with that, you do you build the processes, you do the marketing, and then you are starting to establish the brand. The other side of the equation would be becoming part of a franchise network. Now, with that franchise network, you get a household brand like the UPS store. You get the systems, the processes. So you're an entrepreneur within the confines of a network that's well established. No different than if it was Rocky's Hamburgers or McDonald's. The minute you put up the McDonald's sign, you get instant customers. So I think that it's really, if you're starting something unique, then you may want to go out on your own, obviously, because you're starting your own business. There's something unique to your business, and so you're going to establish the brand. You're going to establish the services, and you're really driving the traffic. If you're more into something that's traditionally done, so for example, pack and ship, then you probably would want to start with a UPS store, because then with that you're going to get the systems, you're going to get the processes, and you're going to get the branding with it. So it really comes down to what is the small business you're starting, and what differentiates you from the rest of your competitors. And I think then that starts to help you with that process of, do I want to be part of a franchise network, or do I want to go out on my own?
Okay. So what would you say will be some of the advantages and disadvantages of having a franchise?
Well, the advantage is obvious, that you have a brand name that everybody knows and you immediately have traffic. Now, there's a startup cost, there's a franchise fee, there's a process that you're following. And so I think that the advantage is that you have instant credibility and you get instant traffic. A little bit of the downside is, although you are an entrepreneur, you're an entrepreneur within the confines of a network. So for example, I may have a UPS store and I have a suite of services that every UPS store has. Now I decide I want to do something different. I don't have a right to do that something different, because I follow the UPS store. And one of the things that makes franchising so successful is the fact that when I walk into a store in Portland, Maine, it's the same as a store in Portland, Oregon, with the same
Mhm.
products and services, the same look. Every Starbucks looks alike, even though they're not franchises, but they're company owned. But there's that consistency. And I think that's what you're getting with the franchise network. So most people would view that as a, kind of an advantage. But if you're that individual who likes to be creative and likes to be a little bit outside the box, you might find that the box is smothering you a little bit in a franchise network because you've got to follow the products and services in the franchise agreement. If you're more of an outside the box person and you really like to test boundaries in terms of products and services, then I think maybe being on your own may be a better way to go.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I tell people a lot too, like, there are different advantages and advantages, but some people, they don't want to just start on their own. They want to take something, like you said, like a franchise, and they feel like they can get instant customers because it's already branded for them. Where other individuals, you have to create your own brand, but there's still options in order to become an entrepreneur. You just got to know what route you want to take.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think the interesting part is the third, maybe kind of example would be, you have the franchise network that sits there today that everybody knows.
Hmm.
You have the entrepreneur who is kind of building their own, but then you have the entrepreneur who's got this creative, neat idea and then decides they're going to franchise. And
Hmm.
so that's how a franchise network starts, right? Years ago, someone, when the MBE started, was out of San Diego area there, and a person could not get a mailbox.
Hmm.
They went to the post office. They couldn't rent the mailbox because there was such a long waiting line for a waiting list for a mailbox. Got so frustrated and said, you know what, I'm going to start my own, and that's how Mailbox, et cetera, started, and then grew to what it is today. The largest, largest franchise network when it comes to the pack and ship. It's world-class organization. Some of the finest entrepreneurs I've ever met or dealt with are in that network. But it's no different. So if you have something unique that you want to do and you're starting, then you could potentially be that become the franchisor at some point and start franchising your idea.
Hmm. Awesome.
You see that a lot, right? T. You see that a lot in gyms, for example. How all of a sudden there's one gym or one
Hmm.
network of gyms. The next thing you know is, there's a different one with a different, focus, and then there's another one that opens up. So yeah, I think probably gyms are the ones, or fitness is the one where you really start to see a lot of new franchise networks kind of growing out of that.
Hmm. Yeah, because I know at one time it was Gold's Gym. That was really a big thing, and now it's like Planet Fitness. That's like
Yeah,
now it's a really big thing.
yeah.
So I'm starting to see like a lot of Planet Fitness is popping up in
But
different
it's interesting. You'd be amazed at how many different networks, are franchise. You think about, for example, Cinnabon, or you think about Carvel, and you think about all these different brands that started out one way, but then over the course of time became franchise. So there's a lot more franchise networks out there than people realize. I mean, I think some of the good, Fridays or franchise restaurants and stuff, and you don't think of them that way. So I
Mhm.
think that there's a lot more networks that are franchise networks than people realize.
Yeah. So you deal with a lot of entrepreneurs. So what would you say will be two or three struggles that you see entrepreneurs encounter?
Well, I would say the first one probably encompasses two or three of my other answers, and that's that, the strength of an entrepreneur sometimes becomes the weakness of an entrepreneur. And what I mean by that is, if you think about, what makes an entrepreneur so great, it's the fact that no one knows your business better than they do. No one's more committed better than they are. No one's more invested than they are. So that's their strength. What's their weakness? No one's more invested than they are. No one knows your business more. So what ends up happening is that they tend to be very tactical,
Mm-hmm.
and they struggle with that first employee at times,
Mm-hmm.
because now they're giving up some authority. And so I think that that's part of what I think a franchise, an entrepreneur has to do is to know when to take that step back, when to be more strategic. Like, what do I want my business to look like in the next 6 months,
Mm-hmm.
year, 18 months from now? how are things changing? How is the business climate changing? How am I going to adapt to it? When do I add that first employee? And how do I allow that employee to feel like they're part of the solution, right? They're part of the family, they're part of the team. How do I get them to feel like they're part of the ownership of this? And so I think those are the couple things where they have to move from being very tactical to being a little more strategic. And then they have to know, okay, it's time for me to add that first employee. How do I do it? What's the training they get? How do I allow them to feel like they're part of something special here?
Yeah. I think that was like kind of like one of my biggest struggles whenever I was looking for interns and looking for assistants. And I finally found like a virtual assistant that's had really worked well for me. But it was like, kind of hard because when you are doing everything on your business is your baby. So you like,
Oh, absolutely.
so you like, can I trust this person? Are they gonna understand my vision? Or are they gonna, deliver like I need them to deliver? And gratefully, me having a virtual assistant has been working out pretty well so far. But like I know when it comes to me trying to actually hire like an employee, like a full-time employee, I know that's kind of going to be like a struggle for me. So because your business is your baby, and then once you got to learn how to release it and delegate certain things. So yeah, I can very relate to that being a struggle, because that's a struggle for me.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And I think what happens is sometimes what drives that first decision is actual business. Okay,
Mhm,
business is really growing and I need help inside the store. Sometimes what drives that, interestingly enough, is you're the best salesperson for the business because you have the passion as the owner, you understand the business, and people love to, do business with the owner of the business, right? They feel like they have that connection with the owner. That sometimes is when you start to believe you need that first employee,
mhm,
is when you're thinking, okay, I need to get out and grow this business. I need to be out there in the community. I need to find, be the person that's finding new business. Well, the best way for you to do that though is to be out of your business and, interacting with the community. Well, then that's when you really have to learn then, okay, it's time for me to add somebody, because, you kind of go, do I leave? I need to get out there, but I really got to run the business. And so I think sometimes, that drives the new employee as much as, as business will sometimes drive a new employee.
mhm.
But then sometimes it's you trying to grow the business will drive a new employee. And it sounds I think sometimes it's counterintuitive to an owner. They're sitting there thinking, well, I don't have enough business yet for the next employee, for my first employee, but I need to hire that first employee because the only way I can get enough business for that employee is by me getting out there and growing the business.
Right.
Because so it's sometimes that becomes that delicate balance.
Mhm. So, how can we as entrepreneurs overcome that struggle, and what it should look like for us moving forward if we are trying to, like, I guess we're using an example as trying to hire the first employee. So, how can we overcome that moving forward in the business?
Well, I think it starts with you have to have that strategic vision of where do you want to take the business,
Hmm.
because in some cases people like to be in that zone. When you get in that zone when things are really starting to click for you, the business is, you're making good money for the time and effort you're putting in. And now the question is, where do you want to take that business? And when you want to take that business, now you're starting to make investments. So for example, I may be in a good spot right now, my revenue, my expenses, and I'm making a good living for my family. When I hire that next employee, that's additional expense, and I may not have enough revenue for that additional expense. That's a strategic, that's kind of a strategic decision. Do I want to make that next investment? Do I want to, add that person? And then what's my plan to grow that revenue to cover that new expense? So those are all strategic visions and strategic decisions. And so the first thing I would say is you need to, as 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 an owner, take that step back and make sure that the things that you're doing are what you want to do and fit into the vision of where you want to take your business. Because I think sometimes it becomes like a mechanical decision. Okay, business is at this point, got to add a second person, but now I add that second person and I'm not driving the revenue to
Hmm.
where I can cover that expense. So I really think it has to be a strategic decision, and you've got to take the time to make that strategic decision. and understand what you're getting into.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Rocky, for sharing your knowledge with us today. I'm going to share the social media handles so you can tell our listeners how they can get in contact with you if need be.
Well, thank you very much. So my website is www, it's the number 3 and the word 60, SIXTY, managementservices.com. It's a very interactive website. The book is called Tighten the Lug Nuts. It's an excellent book when it comes to so it's almost a workbook. It's a story. It's kind of my journey of my career and the lessons I learned along the way and the wonderful people I met along the way. So each chapter is part of a story, but each chapter T stands on its own. So there's lessons about your first 100 days. So you're starting your business, what your first 100 days look like. There's lessons and conversations about, managing people, understanding who your customers are and how you service your customers. So I think the book's a very helpful guide, and we use it a lot on the small when we're working with small businesses as sort of like their workbook of how to and tips along the way. And it's a good, I like to think it's a good story. It'll make you smile. And there's some great stories along the way of my career and the people I've met along the way. So the book is called Tighten the Lug Nuts. It's on Barnes and Noble. Amazon does a great job fulfilling. It's a 5-star book. And so I think that would be a very helpful resource. There's also videos on my website that are helpful videos. And I've done over 95 now podcast interviews. We will certainly load up our podcast interview on there. But the thing that's interesting about the podcast on my site, I have them by leadership competency. So if you're looking for sales, if you're looking for, accountability lessons, if you're looking for different conversations on how to create your legacy, entrepreneurial spirit, you can go to the website, look up a particular competency, and listen to a conversation we had with a talented host like yourself on a particular topic. So I think so the website becomes very useful, becomes almost a library of knowledge and information. You certainly can interact with me as well if you have a question. And if any of your audience has a question that they reach out to you, you can always reach out to me and I'll answer that question for them as well.
Awesome. You guys take advantage of this with Mr. Rocky. He sounds like he's very, very informative of what he's offering into his clients, entrepreneurship. So you guys make sure you check him out, his website, his social media handles. And if you guys want to get in contact with me, my number is 910-317-0396. You can email me at contact@mjfinancial.biz. You can visit my website to schedule a consultation, www.mjfinancial.biz. You can also find this episode on Anchor, you guys, and you can find this video on my YouTube channel for M&J Financial Management for this interview. So thank you once again, Mr. Rocky, for being a guest on the show today. I highly appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And if any of your audience needs some help, please count me in. And certainly, if they're a friend of yours, they're now a friend of mine.
Awesome, Mr. Rocky. So, all right, you guys, we will see you on the next episode of Tips with T.